The plane came to a halt, and the seatbelt light went out. Everywhere around Susie, people started to get up to get their bags. She resisted the urge to do the same, telling herself that she might as well sit and wait rather than stand. She was so far from the exit that it would still be several minutes before she could get out. Nikki's thoughts were interrupted as the man in a suit and tie that had been sitting in the window seat next to hers tried to get past her to the already packed aisle. She pushed back in her seat to let him pass and muttered a few choice expletives. "What?" he asked, and turned, giving Susie an extremely close look at his tie. "Oh, nothing," she answered diplomatically. The man had been rude and annoying the entire flight, and Susie really didn't feel like an argument. She just wanted to get off the plane, get home to her bed, and sleep for a day. Spending Christmas with her family had seemed like a good idea at first. The fact that they told her she couldn't bring Sarah was infuriating, but not unexpected. Nikki's parents were still refusing to accept the fact that she was a lesbian, calling it awful and sinful and wrong. Susie had managed to hold her tongue up until the Christmas Day dinner, when her mother had tried to set her up with a really nice young man who had proved to be not only just as bigoted than her parents, but also more than a little racist. She had exploded, yelled at more or less everybody, leaving them shocked at the table as she stormed out. She had spent the remaining 2 days of her stay crashing on her older brother Michael's couch before flying back home. The aisle was becoming less crowded as the people in business class had made their way off the plane. That meant that filthy peasant class was next. After another minute or two, Susie got up and pulled her bag out of the overhead compartment. She gave her seat a quick check and realized she had forgotten her book in the seat pocket. She grabbed it and tucked it under her arm before following the slow crowd towards the exit. As soon as she was off the plane and had a little room, she set her bag down, placed the book inside, and put on her jacket. Then she headed for the luggage carousel. "At least I don't have to wait for ages for my bag to arrive." Susie leaned against a pillar and rubbed her sore neck while she watched the conveyor belt filled with suitcases and bags of all shapes and sizes, none of them hers. Finally, Nikki's high-visibility, fluorescent yellow bag slid down the chute and onto the belt. She grabbed it and began to make her way through the crowd towards the exit, one of the wheels on her bag squeaking softly. She felt a bit of justified schadenfreude when she passed her seat neighbour, still impatiently waiting for his luggage. Susie walked through the doors to the arrival hall and let the buzz of hundreds of conversations wash over her. Being in a crowd like this felt good. She could be just another face passing by, not having to defend every decision she'd ever made, not having to— Susie! Not having to care about what Susie! Susie was pulled from her thoughts. She looked in the direction of the voice and saw Sarah, standing in the crowd holding a sign with Nikki and lots of red hearts. She changed course and walked right into a hug that felt better than anything she had felt for a week. "Thanks, sweetie," Susie mumbled into Sarah's neck. She closed her eyes and inhaled the almost cinnamon-like scent that was uniquely Sarah's. Sarah just held Susie and slowly stroked her back. "You sounded like you needed a hug on the phone," she finally said. "I did." Susie reluctantly let go of Sarah, and the sign that had been crumpled between their bodies fell to the floor. She grabbed the bag again and let Sarah steer her towards the exit closest to the parking garage outside. "So, what's the deal with the sign?" Susie asked, dropping the crumpled paper in a trash can. "Afraid I wouldn't recognize you. I haven't been gone that long, you know." Sarah smiled sheepishly. "I just wanted to do like in those stupid romantic movies." "Oh!" Susie slipped an arm around Sarah's waist and pulled her closer. They reached Sarah's car and loaded Nikki's bag in the trunk. When they were both in the car, Sarah leaned in close and pulled down the scarf and turtleneck to reveal her collar underneath. She fidgeted theatrically. "And I even wore my funderwear for you," she said coyly. "Your what?" "My funderwear, my diapers." "My God, you're such a dork." Susie smiled and took Sarah's hand. She held it to her cheek and gave the palm a kiss. "It's not that I don't appreciate you trying to cheer me up. I really do. But right now I really don't feel like playing. Oh, Sarah said quietly. I'm sorry. No, 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 don't be. I really do love it that you wanted to cheer me up. It's just that I've had a shitty few days and I just don't want to think about it. It was that bad? Susie nodded. Mm-hmm. Well, in that case I know just the thing, Sarah said, and started the engine. An hour later they stumbled through the door to Sarah's apartment, balancing Nikki's big yellow bag, a plastic bag from the grocery store down the street, and a large pizza box in far too few hands. Sarah kicked off her shoes after pushing the door closed with her butt. Why don't you go take a shower to get rid of the airplane sweat and I'll get things ready here, she said. Susie shrugged off her jacket and headed for the bathroom. A hot shower, pizza, and TV. Just what the doctor ordered. Susie stood in the shower with her forehead against the wall and let the warm water cascade down her neck and back. As her muscles slowly began to relax, she realized just how tense she had been, and also how much she smelled of old cigarette smoke. That's the last time I sleep on Michael's couch. She spat and reached for the shampoo. 15 minutes later, Susie emerged from the steam-filled bathroom, wrapped in Sarah's far too big terry-cloth bathrobe, and still trying to get the towel to stay on her head. Hearing the TV, she padded towards the living room, ignoring the damp footprints her bare feet were making on the hallway floor. On the sofa, Sarah had wrapped herself in their big fuzzy blanket. "Feel better?" she asked. "Mm-hmm." Susie gave up on the towel and just let it hang on her head like a giant hood. "Good. Now get over here." Sarah lifted the blanket to reveal that she was only wearing her diapers and a t-shirt. "You know," Susie said as she crossed the room and sat down next to Sarah. "That's quite a bossy thing to say for somebody wearing diapers and a collar." "Oh, shush. You don't have to be all dominatrixy just because I want to snuggle. You said you didn't feel like playing, and I respect that. And the diapers? I mean, it's not that you don't look cute in them, but if we're not playing—" Sarah leaned closer and whispered in Nikki's ear. "Sometimes I wear them just because I want it for myself, even if you're not there." "And this is one of those times?" Susie allowed Sarah to wrap the blanket around her to enclose them both in a warm and fuzzy cocoon. "Well, I was already wearing them," Sarah said, "and it seemed like a waste to take them off while they're still dry." "Always the economical one, aren't you?" Susie stroked Sarah's forearms. "Sure, we can call it that." Sarah wrapped her arms around Susie and pulled her closer, one hand accidentally slipping inside the robe. "So, are you ready for a little girlfriend therapy?" "Mm-hmm." There was a small gust of cool air as Sarah slipped an arm out from under the blanket. She reached down over the armrest on the sofa and brought back a bottle of Sprite with a straw. After a few fumbled attempts, Sarah managed to hit Nikki's mouth and she sucked hungrily. "Now," Sarah wiggled the remote control in front of Susie. "Nightmare Before Christmas or Gremlins? Honestly, as long as I get to stay like this, I don't care." Susie tilted her head back and gave Sarah a quick, lemon-flavoured kiss. The next hour and a half consisted mostly of pizza, drinks, and cheesy one-liners. At some point, Susie wriggled out of the robe and snuggled closer to Sarah, pushing her t-shirt up as far as it would go. She marvelled at how relaxing that skin-on-skin sensation was. At one point she had to push away one of Sarah's wandering hands and awkwardly reach around her to give her butt a playful little smack. When the movie was over and the pizza had been devoured, the Sarah addressed the elephant in the room. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really," Susie replied. She snuggled closer in an attempt to distract Sarah. "Okay," Sarah said, "but you know that you'll just end up being cranky and irritable for weeks." Susie sighed. "It's just my parents. They just can't accept that I'm not straight. You know, it's just a phase, and you just haven't met the right boy yet. They even tried to set me up with this mouth breather of a guy during the Christmas dinner." Sarah grimaced. "But don't they? I just wish they'd understand how happy I am right now with you." "Or," Sarah kissed Nikki's forehead, "so they really don't like me then?" "Well," Susie grinned, It's not really you that they don't like, but the fact you don't have a penis. Maybe your mother's just worried she's not going to be a grandmother. Susie snorted. Paul has that handled. He already has 2 little rugrats, and knowing Michael, he might have a kid or 2 that even he doesn't know about yet. Then I guess it wouldn't help to tell her that you do have somebody whose diapers need changing on a semi-regular basis. Susie stared at Sarah and began to laugh. You're right, she finally managed. That probably wouldn't help. You'd just be the horrible deviant who corrupted her baby girl. Oh, really? Sarah wiggled her eyebrows. I guess inviting them here next year is out of the question then. Yeah. Susie sighed and leaned back against Sarah. They sat there in a comfortable silence, Sarah slowly stroking Nikki's hair. Then suddenly, Susie felt Sarah's diaper, resting against her hip, grow warm against her skin. Did you just... Uh-huh. You're getting really casual about using your diapers. Maybe a little too casual. Yeah, that Halloween party sort of helped me get over the whole thing about wearing them in public. I mean, as long as I take some precautions, nobody's going to notice them anyway. Susie slid a hand down to rest on the warm plastic. And you like that? She whispered. Sarah nodded. For a while they just lay there on the sofa, not moving, not talking, just being. Eventually, Susie broke the spell. Do you need to get changed? She asked. Sarah shook her head. It can wait. Susie sighed happily as Sarah resumed stroking her hair. It's weird, Sarah said. Sometimes I actually have to remind myself I'm not wearing them. Oh? Yeah, mostly when I'm at home though. So, you've had an accident or 2? No, but it's been close a couple of times, especially at night. Something shifted inside Nikki's mind. And have you been taking precautions? Nah, I wake up in time. I just have to remind myself when I wake up that I'm not wearing my diapers. I think it'd be a good idea to take precautions. Susie turned over so she was facing Sarah. From now on. That's not necessary. Sarah protested. Susie pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her. What made you think you had any choice in the matter? She purred. Now I say that I think it'd be a good idea to take precautions. And you say? Sarah smiled and swallowed. Yes, ma'am, she whispered. Susie woke up as the sun peeked in through her window. She could feel the weight of Sarah's head resting on her shoulder and her arm across her stomach. Susie squinted against the light and saw that Sarah had her legs more or less wrapped around one of hers. The big puffy plastic pants hiding the equally big towel diaper rested firmly against her thigh. It trapped so much heat that it was hard for Susie to feel if Sarah had wet herself. I really hate doing this. Yesterday was so great, and I really don't want to go to work today. Susie started to gently stroke Sarah's hair to wake her up. It didn't take too long before she stirred and opened her eyes. Morning, Sarah mumbled and rubbed her eyes. Morning, sweetie, Susie answered and kissed her forehead. Sleep well? Had the weirdest dream. Sarah let her hand wander from Nikki's stomach and up towards her breasts. Good weird or bad weird? You were in it, and you were wearing this really shiny rubber catsuit and... Sarah paused as she realized what she was saying. Not that I want that, she quickly amended. Of course not. That's why you kept saying no fingerprints in your sleep. Makes perfect sense. Susie smiled when she saw the blush on Sarah's face. I love it when she does that. She reached down to squeeze Sarah's diapered butt cheek. Sounds like you have a few more kinks than just your diapers. Maybe, but I don't hear you complaining when I have to tell you about them, Sarah said defensively. Well, I get to dress in all sorts of naughty outfits when I'm being all mistressy, Susie answered with mock indignation. It's kind of part of the deal. I like that deal. Sarah gave Nikki's left breast a kiss. Ah! I like that deal too, sweetie. Unfortunately, this mistress has work to go to. Or, can't we just stay here? Just a little? No, I have to make up for these last days off. That's not fair. They were sucky days off. They shouldn't count, Sarah complained. Except yesterday. Yesterday was nice. Yes, it was, sweetie, but I really have to get ready for work. Sarah sighed deeply. Okay, I'll make you some breakfast before you go. You have time for that, right? That depends. Susie grinned and gave Sarah's butt another squeeze. Does my little girl need changing first? Sarah blew a raspberry in response. Susie extricated her leg and got out of bed, tiptoeing naked out the door and towards the bathroom. 10 minutes and a really quick shower later, Susie stood in front of Sarah's big wardrobe, trying to find a reasonably casual Tuesday between Christmas and New Year outfit from the limited number of clothes she kept at Sarah's place. After rejecting 2 tops and a skirt she hadn't worn in at least half a year anyway, Susie settled on a white men's shirt and charcoal slacks. After she got dressed, she looked at herself in the mirror. It's a little butch, but I can pull it off. The smell of toast and coffee drew Susie to the kitchen, but when she entered she was a little surprised to see what Sarah was wearing. Fluffy bunny slippers, the big diapers and nothing else. "Ooh, you look nice," Sarah said when she saw Susie. Thanks," Susie finally managed, a little thrown by Sarah's outfit, or rather lack thereof. She certainly seems to be getting more and more comfortable with wearing those. Sarah handed Susie a steaming mug of coffee before fishing 2 pieces of toast out of the toaster. She put them next to 2 others on a plate on the table and absent-mindedly brushed the crumbs from her fingers. Susie sat down by the table while Sarah got butter, jam and some cheese from the fridge. Then she sat down across the table from Susie. "So," Sarah started while spreading butter on a piece of toast, "do you think it'll be a busy day today?" Maybe. I have a little bit of catching up to do," Susie said. Sarah's bare chest and the diaper Susie knew was hidden by the table combined with the casual way she was just eating breakfast by the sunlight coming in through the blinds was just so distracting. "Get it together, Susie. You sound like a moron." Sarah took a bite of the toast and chewed. She licked a bit of jam from her lips before taking a sip of coffee. "I know you've had a shitty couple of days, but are you going to be all right?" "Yeah, it's just—" Susie gestured towards Sarah, waving her hands up and down. Don't worry about it. It's not like anybody's going to see it. I mean, with the blinds like this, you'd have to be on the roof of the building across the street to be able to see in and—" Sarah looked out the window and jumped, pushing her chair back. "Shit, there's somebody up there." "What? Where?" Susie looked all over the top of the building, but couldn't see anybody. Then she saw the grin on Sarah's face. "Ha, I had you," she said. "I definitely had you. Oh, you're a bad, bad girl. You're going to regret that." Susie sat back down again and Sarah pulled her chair back to the table. "Maybe, but it was so worth it." Sarah took another bite of toast. "Seriously though, how busy are the next couple of days going to be for you?" "Why do you ask?" Susie stared into her mug, trying to figure out if she had time for a second cup. "I wanted to do something special for you for New Year's Eve, and it's going to take a little time to get everything ready. And I was thinking maybe we could stay at your place until then." "Of course, sweetie. But remember, I have paper-thin walls and nosy neighbours, so we're going to have to pretend to be really vanilla. Or be really quiet." "Yeah," Susie laughed. "Or that." Susie sighed and leaned back in her chair, looking at the number of messages in her email inbox and the piles of paper on her desk. "A little bit of catching up my arse. This is more like running a fucking marathon against Paula Radcliffe." The Christmas weekend had turned out to be a perfect storm. While Susie had been away, a supplier had filed for bankruptcy, a power outage had wiped out almost a whole day's work, and one of Nikki's team members had been forced to take some unpaid vacation time, or possibly he was fired. Rumour had it that he'd attacked the therapist during one of the anger management classes the HR department had made him attend. Susie wasn't sure if she believed it, but had to admit that it didn't sound entirely implausible. Regardless of whether the rumours were true or not, the net result had been a giant pile of work for Susie. She had had to call Sarah to let her know that she was going to have to pull some serious overtime to get caught up, and that she probably wouldn't have the time nor the energy for any fun the next couple of days. Susie admitted that she had taken the news better than expected. She took a bite of the stale vending machine sandwich that was pretending to be her lunch and glared at the pile of paper. She had been fighting it for 3 hours, and she had barely made a dent. Just as she was about to dive back in, her phone made a happy little chirp. Sarah: "About what time do you think you'll be home? I'm planning dinner." "Right." Susie: "Don't know. Late probably. I'll just grab something on the way." "Right." Sarah: "Oh no. These next couple of days I'm taking care of you. Prepare to be pampered. That's my line, sweetie." Sarah: "Stuck out tongue." The next couple of days had been brutal. Susie was quite certain that if it hadn't been for Sarah taking care of her, she would have been a complete mess, especially after her mother had called her to let her know she had forgotten some things when she left. For some reason or other, her mother had started criticizing Susie and her lifestyle, and had gone into full rant mode so Susie couldn't even get in a word edgewise. Sarah had seen she was getting more and more upset, so she had motioned for her to hand over the phone. When Susie had given it to her, she had promptly hung up, cutting off Nikki's mother mid-sentence. When she inevitably called back, Sarah had answered the phone and said what she wished she could have said herself. "Listen, you shrill shrew. If you're so blinkered by your own personal hang-ups that you can't see that you're hurting your daughter, then you ought to be ashamed of yourself. We are together. She makes me happy, and I'm pretty sure it's mutual. Susie is not your little girl anymore. She is a grown woman, and she's allowed to make her own decisions, and if you can't handle that, you can take a running start and jump off the big pier." Then she had just hung up, walked over to Susie, and hugged her. Susie had just buried her face in Sarah's sweater, hating herself for crying. Sarah had just held her, slowly stroking her hair and her back and letting her get it all out of her system. Afterwards, she had felt completely spent, but in a good way. By lunchtime, New Year's Eve, Susie was finally approaching something that resembled being up to date. It had taken a minor miracle to find a firm that could handle supplies temporarily until a more permanent contract could be set up, but she had managed that. A date with one of Nikki's co-workers had been negotiated down to a bottle of 12-year-old whiskey for the creepy IT guy who had spent the better part of an afternoon digging around the system to recover most of the lost data. And last, but not least, everybody on her team had pitched in to handle the extra workload caused by being one man short. Susie looked over the remaining work before standing up. Feeling like a general addressing the troops, she cleared her throat. "Okay, guys, I'm sure you all have places you'd rather be than here, so I'll be brief." There was a murmur of assent. "What we've managed these last couple of days is nothing short of a miracle. Another hour or two, and we should be done, and we can all enjoy a long weekend off. I know I will." When Susie returned to her desk, she saw there was a message on her phone from Sarah to call her when she had the time. She gave the remaining work another quick glance before finding some privacy to return the call. "Hi, sweetie," Susie said when Sarah answered. "What's up?" "Oh, nothing much. I'm just putting some finishing touches on a few things. I was just wondering when you think you'll be done today." "I don't know. 3 hours, maybe a little more." "So, 4-ish? I guess. Why, you have something planned?" "Oh, yeah. When you get home, I want you to put on your most mistressy clothes before coming over tonight." "Sounds like you've planned something big." "Well..." Sarah hesitated ever so slightly. "I just wanted to make sure we get the year started the right way." "Mom?" Susie could almost hear Sarah's grin as she added that final word. "And you want to be a good little girl, don't you?" Susie couldn't help arching an eyebrow, even though there was no way for Sarah to see it. "Maybe not that good. You may have to be a little strict if I'm naughty." Susie laughed. "Don't you know just what to say?" "I do my best. Will you call me when you leave your place so I can get everything ready?" "Of course, sweetie." "Thank you, Mom." Sarah made kissing noises before hanging up, leaving Susie with a smile that really seemed to confuse her team when she came back. Almost 4 hours later, Susie walked through her front door. The apartment was deathly silent. There wasn't even any noise from her neighbours. They must have gone to celebrate with someone else, or started drinking really early. Susie took off her shoes and coat and headed into the living room. She flipped through 5 or 6 CDs before finding one that caught her fancy. Seconds later, David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes filled the room, and Susie sang along while she half walked, half danced to the bathroom. The hot water hammered down on Nikki's skull, almost, but not quite, drowning out the music. Susie just stood there, feeling herself go from work mode to a far more relaxed weekend mode. 3 days off, Susie. This is going to be glorious. It took Susie quite a while before she felt ready to turn off the water and let the cold air outside the shower hit her. She quickly dried herself and went to the bedroom. Finding the most mistressy clothes proved to be a bit of a challenge. It wasn't as if Susie had an abundance to choose from, but with the right attitude, anything could work. Okay, underwear. Something small, black and silky. It didn't take Susie long to fit something that would fit the bill. The tight black leather pants were also pretty much a no-brainer, since they were clearly Sarah's favourites. At least until I end up wearing something even shinier and smoother. Susie paused for a moment, trying to imagine Sarah's reaction to the latex pants she kept hinting to. Her head would probably explode. The top proved trickier to pick out. There was a crisp white blouse that would contrast nicely with the black leather. Nope. Too similar to what I wear to work. Next, she considered a charcoal turtleneck sweater. Yeah, like I want to look like one of those Steve Jobs wannabes in an Apple store. Her hand brushed against a joke t-shirt with a corset print on that Sarah had bought for her. Yeah, right. Susie was just about to tear out her hair when she spotted something. Something that made her think. She pulled out the dark red top she had worn the day Sarah first wore a diaper for her, almost a year earlier. Yes, if this doesn't set the mood, I don't know what will. She put it on and checked herself out in the mirror, trying to give herself a stern look. After packing some clothes and hers and Sarah's favourite toys in an overnight bag, Susie let the final seconds of Ziggy Stardust play out before switching off the stereo and calling Sarah. "Hey there, sweetie," she said when Sarah picked up. "I just thought I'd let you know I'm on my way out the door now." "Great. By the way, would you mind swinging by a hardware store or something to pick up some duct tape on the way?" "Ooh, planning something naughty." Susie grinned at the thought of Sarah all wrapped up in tape, squirming and completely helpless. Sarah laughed. "Not really. Sorry. I just need to fix something." "Okay, I should be there in half an hour's time." "You almost sound disappointed. You were hoping I'd be wearing a couple of little patches of tape and nothing more, weren't you?" "I will neither confirm nor deny," Susie said facetiously. "Not even a little hint. Some inspiration for a story, maybe?" "Nope." "Ow! What if I promise to be a good girl and obey all my beloved mistress' commands?" "Oh, you're going to do that anyway, my little pet," Susie purred. "Now you behave yourself until I get there, okay?" "No." "No playing with myself, I know," Sarah interrupted, her voice dripping with mock exasperation. "Also, no interrupting. Good little girls know when to keep quiet." "Yes, Ma'am," Sarah said meekly. "I'm sorry, I'll be good." "That's better. Now see you in a little bit." Susie was sure she could hear a giggle on the other end of the line as she hung up. Maybe I should chastise her for that too. Susie opened the CD player, took the David Bowie CD, and put it back in its cover before dropping it into her bag. And some good music to start the new year with. Susie checked her watch as she fumbled one-handed with her keys. 52 minutes. If I ever end up behind a little old lady who starts arguing with the one cashier working about the price of plastic bags and how they were cheaper before, and then buying them along with a reciprocating saw and insisting on paying for them with change she digs out of her handbag. If that ever happens again, I'm going to lose it. She opened the door and was met with a warm breath of air that smelled like chocolate cake. "Sarah, it's me," she called. "Be right there." Sarah's voice came from down the hall. Susie put her shoes on the rack next to the door and hung her coat on of the hooks. She was just about to head down the hallway to put her bag in the bedroom when Sarah came out of the bathroom. She was wearing light grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt. "Oh, wow," she said when she saw Nikki's outfit. "You look—" She paused, clearly trying to find the right word. "Incredible." Sarah wrapped her arms around Susie and gave her a big hug. "I'll put the bag away when I get dressed," she said. Then she took Nikki's hands in hers and walked backwards, gently pulling Susie towards the living room. What Susie saw when she walked through the door made her speechless. All the furniture had been pushed up against the walls, and in the middle of the room was a big tent made of what looked like several sheets. And there were candles everywhere. A small, safety-minded voice in the back of Nikki's head told her that most of them had to be electric, otherwise they'd be a serious fire hazard. "I wanted to do this on the roof, but it's just too cold. We're practically only a couple of degrees up from the heat death of the universe." Sarah led Susie to the giant pile of cushions and duvets in the tent and helped her sit down. "You just relax and I'll get dressed too. Oh, where's the duct tape?" "In my coat pocket," Susie said absent-mindedly. She was still taking everything in. The tent had been set up, so they had a view out of the living room windows. There was a small table with cakes and coffee mugs next to the pile Susie was sitting in the middle of, and under the windows, between two small electric radiators, was the TV. The screen showed a burning fireplace. Susie leaned back and looked up at the ceiling, and how the flickering golden lights created dancing patterns that were almost hypnotic. She was so absorbed that she almost missed the sound of bare feet against the hallway floor. The sound was muted when Sarah stepped from the hallway and onto the living room carpet. When she came around the tent so Susie could see her, however, she was still surprised at what she saw. Sarah was wearing an enormous diaper and nothing else. Hanging from the collar around her neck was the chain leash they had bought almost a year earlier. She knelt next to the pillows and lowered her gaze. I mean... Susie was at a loss for words. Finally, her brain caught up with her and she cleared her throat. You look absolutely adorable," she managed. "Thank you, mistress," Sarah whispered softly. She crawled closer until the leash dangling between her arms came close enough for Susie to grab. Then she stopped, letting Susie pull her closer. She ended up lying on her back across Nikki's lap, the chain forming a cold line from her neck to her armpit. Susie had one hand under her back, while the other rested on her diaper. "That's a big diaper you have there," Susie said. "Way to go, genius. Sounding real smart there. I made the Halloween diaper a little bigger." Susie lifted Sarah up, so her head rested on Nikki's upper arm. "Not just a little," she commented, and gave the diaper a squeeze, making Sarah squirm a little. "Do you like it, Mom?" Susie smiled at Sarah. "It's perfect," she said. For the longest time they just sat there, Susie slowly stroking Sarah's hair, and Sarah playing with one of the buttons on Nikki's top. The only sounds were the sounds of the fire from the TV and the wind outside the window. Occasionally, Sarah would begin to fidget, but when she did, Susie would slip her hand just inside the top of Sarah's giant diaper and slowly stroke her stomach with her thumb. In short, it was a perfect moment. Too bad it won't last. "Mom, what's wrong?" Sarah looked up at her with a worried expression on her face. Why do you ask, sweetie? You just went all frowny and worried all of a sudden." Sarah reached up to stroke Nikki's cheek. Susie turned her head and kissed her palm. "It's just, this is so wonderful, and I don't want it to end." "Don't be sad," Sarah said, sounding like she was consoling a child who just found out Santa wasn't real. Susie sighed. 3 more days. 3 more days and 4 more nights. Then it'll be Monday, and our lives go back to the way they were a couple of hours ago." Sarah wriggled her way up to hug Susie. She nuzzled the side of her neck, causing an involuntary shiver to run down Nikki's back. "It doesn't have to," she murmured. What do you mean? I have something for you. Sarah crawled off Susie and got to her feet. She extended a hand to Susie to help her up. A little confused, Susie took Sarah's hand. Do you trust me? Sarah asked. I thought that was my line, Susie answered with a sly smile. I'm serious, Susie. Do you trust me? Susie looked at Sarah, her serious tone contrasting wildly with her appearance. Her mussed-up hair, giant diapers and slightly bow-legged stance made her look a little like an oversized baby. Why is she standing like that? She didn't do that before. Susie cocked her head a little to one side. Sweetie, have you wet yourself? Yes, but that can wait, Sarah said airily. Yes, sweetie, of course I trust you. Close your eyes. Susie could hear the excitement in Sarah's voice. When she did as Sarah asked, she felt Sarah take her hands and start to gently pull her along. No peeking, Sarah said, with a childish mock seriousness. They left the living room and slowly walked down the hallway. At what was probably the end of it, Sarah slowly spun Susie around a couple of times, so when she opened a door, Susie had no idea which of the 3 rooms at the end of the hallway it led to. Threshold, Sarah warned, and Susie took another careful step forwards. Sarah let go of Nicky's hands. Now just give me a second. Susie waited patiently while she heard several quiet clicks. Okay, you can look. Susie opened her eyes. She was standing just inside the door to the bedroom, which was lit by the golden glow of a dozen fake candles. Sarah knelt in front of her with her thighs spread wide apart by the diapers. She was looking expectantly up at Susie, smiling like she was waiting for something. Susie looked around. Something was different, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The bed looks the same as always, minus the pillows and duvet, of course. The Narnia wardrobe, the dressers, the big chair with the… Hang on, dressers? Where'd the second one come from? It took Susie a couple more moments to recognize the dresser from the guest bedroom. You've redecorated? Susie asked, not quite sure what else she could say. Sarah didn't say anything. She only held out her hands to Susie. In her open palms was a box that looked like an oversized version of the boxes jewelers put rings in. Sarah, I thought we agreed on no expensive gifts. Just open it, Ma'am. Please. Sarah almost whispered the final word. Susie took the box from Sarah's hands and flipped open the hinged lid. Inside the box was a flat square of brass with Nicolette Ellis and Sarah Nilsson in black letters. What's this? Susie asked, turning the little piece of metal over. It's for the mailbox, Sarah said, downstairs. Realization dawned on Susie. Are you asking me to move in? She looked down at Sarah kneeling in front of her. She almost seemed to be holding her breath. If you want to, Sarah whispered, barely audibly. Susie fell to her knees in front of Sarah and embraced her. Of course I want to, sweetie. Nicky's lips met Sarah's in a kiss so intense that Susie halfway expected music to swell. It was hungry and urgent, but at the same time soft. It almost felt like she was melting as Sarah held her. Eventually their lips parted and they helped each other up. For a few more moments they just stood there, slow dancing to music nobody could hear. When Sarah's hands slid down to cup Nicky's leather-clad buttocks, Susie answered by giving Sarah's diapered butt a squeeze. So, Susie said with a grin as she pushed Sarah onto the bed, the plastic sheet crinkling softly when she landed. What do you say we get you cleaned up and changed so we can start the new year with a bang? Sarah giggled and lay back, spreading her legs as Susie crawled onto the mattress between them. This is going to be the best year ever.